Polish army, but in 10 battle by his nephews. In theory, this shouldn't have crippled the realm. Turkic raiders and civil war were nothing new to the Rus. Vladimir and Yaroslav had dealt with both in their time and preserved the integrity of their realm.
Hi, Howard.
This time, however, there would be no great prince to lead the Rus back to glory. Other external factors led to the political and economic stagnation of the Kievan realm. Back in 1054, the Christian world was divided by the Great Schism, when the Orthodox Patriarch of Constantinople officially cut ties with the Catholic Pope in Rome, and as fellow Orthodox, the Rus sided with the Patriarch. As a result, the trading ties that Yaroslav had once cultivated with Western Europe declined. The Latin world came to see the Rus as heretics. Byzantium was not the powerful ally it once was either. In 1071, the Eastern Romans found themselves brought to their core with a series of civil wars following a devastating invasion of Celtic Turks saw them lose most of their territory. Between that and the Cumans cutting off the most prosperous river trade routes,
Oh,
How are you?
not bad, huh? Thanks.
I'm sorry?
Or thanks.
Good. Hi, Ava.
Hi, Zach.
Sorry, I had to, on the Father's Day, I had to move our presentation. You know. I apologize. Not that I'm particularly ready today either, but I'll give it a shot. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You were a little faint before.
I'm sorry?
You were a little faint before.
Yes, Zach, you are faint.
All right. Hopefully we'll get a good turnout today. Presenting, I'm not, I don't get offended. This is all posted on the YouTube channel. Just a reminder, Saturday and Sunday we have presentation. Saturday we have, continuation of the Roman Republic. And then on Sunday we have Richard present, Turkic Kaghanate, or the Turkish people throughout ages. So used to be many countries, there's only several left. We'll give it a couple of minutes.
Well, I was looking, you were asking about a couple of possible topics. I've been looking into King Pyrrhus of Epirus.
Which one?
Pyrrhus?
Oh, Pierce. Yeah, okay. You wanna take that on?
I'm willing to take that one on. I'm writing it up. I'm reading through Plutarch's version of it. I'm gonna have to track down another. I've got a general source in ancient warfare, which is interesting. I've got to track down another source of some kind. Hopefully, the libraries in Toronto here are opening up.
That's great. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
It's he was an interesting leader. Eventually dying through somebody throwing a bucket of shit over his head.
Well, actually, this is actually one of the reasons it's fascinating me. I think what we're seeing is Greek tragedy. Apparently, the first step is he said, "Oh, let's conquer Rome and let's conquer Sicily and let's conquer Carthage, and then we can come home and drink wine and tell tales." And somebody said, "Well, we can drink wine and tell tales now. What are you doing?" And of course, he goes out and gets him killed. His actual death is he was hit by a roofing towel thrown by the grandmother of somebody he was fighting with.
Yeah, because they kept throwing shit out the windows.
So we're not talking GILF here. We're talking very, very elderly lady. This is not the real way real men go out. So he's clearly being punished by the gods for his hubris.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's what we call it, the purest victory.
I take it this is the wrong crowd to be telling Hazel McCallion jokes to. Conceivably, you could go to Mississauga, Ontario, and terrorize some young men. Find out how Hazel McCallion was the mayor of Mississauga, and she was a baseball player back in the 1930s. So her throwing arm may still be good. Who knows?
Hi,
When you're a real man, you die in a heap of you either get stabbed treacherous in the back or you die in a heap of enemy corpses.
That's hilarious.
Yes, hi. How come I'm not seeing myself? I'm just seeing you, and then I'm seeing what is it, Howard?
I'm here.
We can see you really well.
I'm seeing 5 people on the screen here.
Oh,
And maybe you
okay.
gotta scroll. Try
Oh, I
scrolling.
guess I'm going to gallery. Okay, let's see. Yeah, now I got it. Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
How big is your screen?
Let me just post online that we're live.
Hmm.
Anybody wants to join?
Yeah, I'm getting a window. I had a window pop up saying you were recording this.
Again, if you guys have anything to add to this topic, you know, like I said, I've been working so hard. I had a chance to prepare a really good presentation. It's all mostly from, you know, something I've read before. I have not been able to put a concise, but you know, it's okay. We're having fun here. This is history discussion. I want to have an open discussion. If I have about 30 slides, but they're not necessarily needs to be in any kind of order. If anybody has a question or want to add something, or you know, knows more, I'm more than willing to, you know, let you speak and give.
Is that Byzantium?
Yes, sir.
Ah, okay.
That's an
I think
alternate spelling?
Yeah, yeah. I like I said, I put this together.
Well, I'm not criticizing, translating. I take it you're coming from Russian sources?
That's right.
Yeah, so you got a Greek word translated to Russian, translated to English. Things get weird.
That's right. I don't know, not a big turnout today. What's going on?
Are you gonna do the Khazars figure into the story at all?
Just very, I mean, I want to do Khazars differently in separate subject matter, probably somewhere in August or September as a separate. I'm actually doing Bulgars and Khazars, you know, separately. So I already have Bulgars, Bulgars.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also will have a Danube Bulgars scheduled, and I'll have Khazars because they are such interesting and fascinating, you know, especially to us Jews, because of the factor that, you know, out of nowhere, the Turkic nation takes over and become Jewish nation. That was interesting.
Yeah, well, of course, it's a question of how much, you know, how Jewish they were, which is, you know, it's a question for some debate, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, they haven't left a lot of the written chronicles as much as Russians did, as much as you know, even Bulgars have more of a chronicles. It's just not, it's not very advertised. The only thing we have actually is a letter from an Andalusian Jewish guy writing to Khazars and getting a reply back saying that, you know, yes, we're Jewish, and that's pretty much it. It was an exchange, one letter.
Yeah, there was a novel serialized. It was written by Michael Chabon, serialized in the New York Times Magazine, I think back in 2007. It might have been called something like Four for the Road, or was something about on the road. But it wasn't like an old Bob Hope movie. It was it was a story of a bunch of these wandering, these Jews who were handy with a sword, who were running around about 1,000 years ago, and one of the important figures was Khazar.
Oh,
I think his name was Pesach. You might appreciate that.
When you say Khazar, you mean K-A-Z-A-R, right?
KH. Hazar.
Yeah, Khazar, Khazar.
Okay, yeah.
And it's interesting. We actually have a joke in Russia that a lot of the Ashkenazi Jews in Russia, they're not really Russian, they're Khazars. You know.
Well, there's a wild theory that that Ashkenazi Jews were of Turkic origin, but I think that's really flimsy.
Yeah, no, I mean, like Greg, for example, he did his DNA. There is 0 Turkic blood in his DNA. He's 100% Ashkenazi. So it's not.
This is tricky. I was reading something on Nazi scientists from World War II, and they're out in the Ukraine area, out on the Caucasus and stuff, and they're trying to figure out what racial group everybody belonged to, and it was fiendishly complicated. So they sort of worked out that one group had to be Jewish, but they like to travel at Arn, which the Nazis thought was great, so maybe they're not Jewish.
Yeah, well, of course, the Nazis were very good at converting, a language group into a so-called race, and of course, Ashkenazi Jews who were Yiddish speakers were speaking an Aryan language, basically, with like 10% of Hebrew.
Mm-hmm. Well, it didn't protect the ones in Poland.
It didn't protect anybody.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's start a little bit. I mean, we have 6 people. I mean, we will make it a better discussion. Like I said, I'm not fully prepared. I apologize for that. I'm good at running a group. I'm not good at presenting, but sorry. I can schedule it well. I know certain things, but not well enough. So anyway, today's subject matter, we're talking about Kievan Rus and relationship with Byzantium. So, I mean, in all respects, if you think about the Rus and the land of Rus, and I'll have the maps, Kiev is located in current day Ukraine, and, next to the Dnieper River, it has got a couple of rivers around the area. It was prior to Slavs settling in there, it was Scythians that lived there. And Greeks wrote, a lot of things about Scythians and actually mentioned early version of Slavs. In the 1st century AD, that's when we actually see the first trace of Slavs. So let me just go to the next slide. So basically, if you look at the background, between 400 to 1000 CE, small, sparsely spaced communities began to develop modern Ukraine, So there were subsistence-based, largely isolated communities. First inhabitants of Rus migrated there from Nordic countries and from the Eastern Europe. So you have a combination of Slavs and they call them Varangians, early Varangians, let's just call it. So basically, Rus was not a state at the time. And if you think of it, the Vikings or Varangians, that's what Russians call Vikings, actually did not have a state and around that area. I mean, their first state was developed much, much later. So the first, you can think, Varangian state was actually the Kievan Rus. The first Nordic, the first Viking state was that. So you think, Normans invading Russia and developing a first Russian state. So Slavs kind of settle around Volga River around 500 AD. They were mainly hunters and farmers, okay? They mostly lived in villages, and there were about like 25 related families, not more than that. By 600 AD, Eastern Slav controlled all of the land far off east of Volga River, and I'll have a map for that as well. Forests provided East Slavs with the timber they needed, and they worked with wood really well. And East Slavs soon became skilled in building with wood. They used logs to build boats and izbas. So how does izba look? Okay, so let's just continue on this. And I just wanted to show you how the izba. This is the early and current Slav built house. It's called izba. So basically, izba is a one-room log cabin with a gabbled rod and wooden window frames. Okay, villages, and basically this is what they were good at. They were good with wood. And what were the, prior to Kievan Rus becoming Orthodox, where they worship? And prior to them becoming a city, villages worshiped many gods and honored nature, spirits, and ancestors. Popular gods were, let me just go. Popular gods were Perun, is on the right. This guy is Perun, and Perun was responsible for. He was a god of thunder, lightning, and basically god of lust and everything else. He was like an Aphrodite verse and a Zeus in one. And then the one on the left was called Volos, and the Volos was responsible for cattle and sheep and anything that has to do with domestic animals, basically. So let's just go back to the. The settlement of the Rus were frequently subject to raids, and who was raiding the Rus? There was, Kumans, who was a Turkic / Iranian tribes, Tartars, which Mongols, occasionally Manchu from the Far East, Cossacks. Actually, Cossacks came that far up. Who were the Cossacks? Edge dwellers, those who live apart, were outcasts of the traditional communities made up of criminals, served runaways, and other social outcasts. This group lived in the fringes of society and also participated in raiding to stay in their community. There also was a significant communities of Turkish Muslims in Caucasus Mountains around Crimea and Black Sea. Because you would think of it, a lot of the Muslim lands in Chechnya, Dagestan, current Dagestan, and Caucasus were converted to Muslim religion much earlier than Russia accepted Orthodoxy, and we'll get into that. So thus, Russia in general is a nation of many nations, a people made up of many peoples. There was not only Russia, but many, we'll call them Rusias. All right, so let's just move on. So now, around the area, and we'll get to the map, there was a lot of slow-moving rivers in the area west of Volga. At first, East Slavs used them as roads between the villages. So they moved around in slow-moving rivers. Before long, they began using them for trade as well. They set up a trade route that ran from a Baltic Sea in the north to the Caspian Sea in the south. And you'll see how important that is. By 800, Slavs had built many trading towns along the riverbank. 5 months of winter, merchants gathered fur, honey, and other forest products. In the spring, brought it to Byzantium. They traded it for cloth, wine, weapons, jewelry, and development of their civilization. And jewelry for development of their civilization. To protect trade routes, Slavs relied on Viking warriors from Scandinavia called Varangians. Okay, so we saw this. I just want to talk about Varangians. And we will get to this, but this is the dynasty of Rurik. Rurik, the last person of Rurik dynasty that died was the Ivan the Terrible. He actually was the last Rurik that died. But the first Rurik set up the Kievan Rus. And actually his town wasn't Kiev, his town was Novgorod. So the Rurik was the first one. Then after him, we had Igor or Ikor, which is the Nordic name, Olga of Kiev. Olga had grandson Sviatoslav, and therefore they're on. Yaropolk, Oleg, and therefore they're on. And it's basically just showing all the lineages. How do we know about all this? There was a, chronicler. One second, let me just admit somebody, sorry. By the way, does anybody have any questions, or we'll get through maps, so don't don't get a, we'll get to the maps, but basically, how do we know about all this, right? So there was, this is the map. I mean, it's not a very elaborate map, but this is Novgorod and this is Kiev, and this is more elaborate map, right? So you have Volga Bulgars in this area. We have Khazars on the right. Obviously Kiev right here, Novgorod up top, closely to the to Varangians or Nordic Baltic areas, and so Bulgars, as we know, some went to the Volga River, and some went to Danube, and the ones that went to Danube became Slavic Bulgars, and ones that went to Volga became Muslim. As we know. So basically, let me show another more of elaborate map. Again, this is going to be more important as well. So this is a Kiev Principality right here. There's a city Kiev right here, Novgorod, and this is more of the towns. And then again, you have Black Sea and you have Khazars here. You have Pechenegs, who are another Turkic tribe that constantly attacked, Russia, Kiev, and they also had a lot of problems, obviously, with Byzantium. They traded with them, they fought with them, and they raided. The Russians also raided a lot of the Bulgar areas. So again, sorry. How do we know about this? We know about this from the chronicle called Prime Chronicles from a monk. His name is Nestor. And what he did is he basically jotted down Russian history. He was the, Herodotus of Russia. I mean, the date here is incorrect. As actually it was 12th century. He was 11th century to 12th century chronicler. And basically he was saying that Russians were so disorganized that they wanted to call on Varangians to come and rule them. So they called on Rurik family. And who were the Rurik family? So Rurik family was either Swedish noble Vikings family or royalty, or they were from Denmark. It wasn't exactly established where they were from, but in general, they were considered to be North Varangian chieftain. And he didn't come just by himself. Rurik came with his brothers Sinisius and Truver. So they were invited by Slavs to rule Slavic areas because they were extremely disorganized. So when he comes in, basically, he gets invited, and he established in the city of Novgorod. Okay, his successor. His name was Oleg, and we'll get to that, but we'll just go to the next one. So the Vikings, so Nestor Chronicles tells of a legendary prince named Rurik that sailed down the river from the north and united the lands of the Rus. So what does Rus means in Nordic language? It means rowing or your friend. So in Nordic language, a translation of Rus means rower that rows into the land of Russia. Briefly under his flag and brought order to the peoples of Rus lands. Contemporary historians agree that Nestor is referring to the Viking invasion of the 10th century, and it suggests that without a Viking conquest of the Rus lands, the Rus would have never remained would have remained primitive and unorganized. Vikings established city-state throughout the Rus. It's called House of Ruriks, and became the first major rulers of the Russian lands. Okay. Any questions or? Okay, any questions?
Yeah,
Somebody was asking me a question. All right. So this is a Viking invasion, right? So on 8th century, everything is in the I guess dark red, almost purple. That's how the Vikings went around. Then you have more lighter colors. That's 9th century. So the 10th century Russia is in the orange. That's when they invaded around 10th century. That's when the Vikings came and basically established their rule within the Slavs. So there was a lot of intermarriages, and a lot of the Russian names actually convert well into the Nordic names.
So are you talking about Rurik coming down before this time?
Yes, Rurik apparently was invited and came down, earlier. So the Russia was established, but most of the establishments and most of the development happened in the 10th century. So it's with King Oleg, and which was around 907, and King Ingvar, or his Russian name is Igor. So that's 10th century. So Rurik was 9th century, and the Ingvar and Oleg, which are his sons, are actually in the 10th century. Okay. All right. So again, let's go to the next slide. Sorry. All right. So this is Prince Igor. Okay. And we'll get to him. But prior to Prince Igor, there was a Rurik successor. His name is Oleg. He actually was not related to Oleg. Igor is Rurik's son. Oleg was not. He was just one of the Viking chieftains that became the leader of or the knyaz. They call it knyaz, means he's like I don't know if you know the word boyar. Boyars is the royalty of Russia, and knyaz is like a king or czar of boyars. So he was the top of the food chain. So let me just go up. All right. So prior to Prince Igor, we have this Prince Oleg. And what's interesting is Prince Oleg invaded Byzantium capital, Constantinople, and it was around 907. And he actually took about 80,000 men, but again, take it with a grain of salt, and 2,000 warships, and basically quickly overpowered Greek foes. I mean, obviously, most of the Byzantine were Greek, and established a peace treaty with a tribute.
Zach?
Yes.
Yeah, can I ask a question? Is there any similarities in the language in Russian or Danish or Swedish? Because for me, they're all impossible, but.
No, so we'll get to the language, but the Russian language was established on Cyrillics, which is a Slavonic language that was passed down to Bulgaria by Byzantium monks who was Cyril, and it's almost religious language. They didn't even take Greek language. It was completely different from anything that anybody had. It's a Cyrillic alphabet. It was developed. It looks a little bit like Greek, but it has completely different pronunciations. So it was used during the preachings and during the ceremonies and in monasteries, and that's what Russia adopted from Bulgaria or Bulgars.
Zach?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could say a little bit about the languages. Russian is, of course, a Slavic language, and specifically, it's an Eastern Slavic language, unlike Polish, which is a Western Slavic language, and Serbian, for example, which is a Southern Slavic language. The Vikings spoke, were part of the Scandinavian language community, which is North Germanic. So those were languages or dialects of the Germanic family. So yeah, Germanic and Slavic are different branches of the Indo-European family. Now, of course, as you say, Slavic was not a written, there was no written Slavic until I guess it was the 700s with the two monks created the Cyrillic alphabet from the Greek, but adapting it very substantially to create an alphabet for the purpose of making the scriptures available in Slavic. Thanks.
Right. So mostly the development of Russian language also happened after the Bulgaria got conquered by Byzantium, and a lot of the scholars had otherwise switched to Kievan Rus from Bulgaria because they had, and that's what they adapted. They were more closely to that than the Byzantium. Anyway, so this guy Oleg, prior to Igor, he basically goes out and fights in Constantinople and establishes the profitable trading route that would benefit both parties. What's interesting, Byzantine envoys attempted to poison Oleg before he could approach Constantinople. When his navy was within sight of Constantinople, he found the city gate closed and entry into Bosphorus barred with iron chains, which that's what they did to Turks as well. At this point, Oleg resorted to subterfuge. He effected a landing on the shore and had some 2,000 dugout boats, which called monoxila, equipped with wheels. So basically, he put in the wheels on the boats and he took them to shore and he went around the chains. After his boats were thus transformed into the vehicle, he led them to the wall of Constantinople and fixed his shield to the gates of the imperial capital. And peace negotiations ultimately relieved the threat. So Constantinople was extremely, petrified of this guy, Oleg. Now we come to this guy, Prince Igor. So Prince Igor, he was born in 912 AD, died in 945. In 914, led an expedition into Transcaucasia that ended in total disaster for his foes. So what happened? The Greeks used the Greek fire on him and destroyed all his boats, basically. Igor did manage to extend the authority of Kiev over Pechenegs, who were the Turkic people inhibiting the steppes north of Black Sea, as well as over the East Slavic tribe of Drevlani. Drevlani means the people that live in the forest. They're also Slavs. They call them Drevlani. And they call them Polyani, means the people that lived in the open field, which is a Russian word. Pole means Polyani. Drevlani means derevo, which means a tree. So they call them a tree people. So they're different Slavs. So they fought with each other. So you went to Dereva, the land of Drevlani, located in the region of Pripyat River, to collect the tribute. However, the Drevlani rebelled and basically, decapitated him and killed him. So Igor dies, and his widow Olga from Kiev, and that's, this is very interesting painting on the bottom. This is actually Surikov. If anybody knows Russian painters, she, receives her husband Igor, and again, remember they are half Slavic, half Nordic, so they're full into revenging these people, Drevlani. So on top of that's her picture, and on the bottom that's a famous Russian painter, Surikov, and that's where she receives Igor's body, and she's a wife. Now she basically says, you know what? I'm gonna revenge my husband against these people, Drevlani, who are the Eastern Slavs that live in the forest. So the Drevlani wanted Olga, now that she's a widow, to marry their prince. His name was Mal, right? Making him the ruler of the Kievan Rus. So she's in charge of the whole Kiev now, right? And so Olga was determined to remain in power and preserve it for her son. So she has a son from Igor. She doesn't want another husband. She just wants to preserve her power. But she knows that in the ancient times, you can't remain by yourself. You have to be married. You know, there's a, successful marriages between Drevliani and her. Russian Nordic combination would give rise to a much bigger empire. So she basically said, you know what? I still remember that they killed my husband. I'm gonna do something to revenge, this whole thing. So she called 20 Drevliani to persuade Olga to marry their Prince Mal and give up the rule in the Kievan Rus. So Drevliani wanted to take over the whole Kievan Rus. She had them buried alive. So they came basically with the proposal to marry her, and she kills them. Then she sent a word to Prince Mal, who didn't come yet, that she's accepting the proposal, but required their most distinguished men to accompany her in a journey in order for her people to accept the offer of marriage. Okay, so she's very crafty. Send me the most distinguished people. They'll let them accompany me. She didn't tell them that she killed the other 20 people. She's telling them, send me more. So Drevliani sent their best men who governed their land. Upon their arrival, she offered them a warm welcome and an invitation to clean up after the journey in a bathhouse, the Russian banya. After they entered, she locked the door and set fire to the building, burning them alive. One story says that Olga declared that she does not wish to lay a heavy tribute to Drevlians as Igor, her husband, did. So now she's next to the Drevlian's capital, which is called Korostan. And she's saying, listen, I don't want to lay any heavy tribute on you. Let's make a deal. All she has in mind is revenge. The people of Korostan, which is the capital of Drevliani, were overjoyed and eagerly fulfilled the princess' will. What was princess will? She said, give me 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each household. And they were confused. Well, why? Okay, it's not a big deal. It's not like she's asking for, goats and, cows. Unfortunately for them, she still has vengeance in her mind. She had her soldiers attach to each bird a small piece of sulfur and wrapped in cloth and tied to the fuse. When night fell upon the city, she ordered the fuses to be lit and the birds to be set free, flying back over the Korostan, the capital of Drevliani, with their tail feathers alight. The sparrows and the pigeons set the entire town aflame. So now Drevliani are leaving the town, and she's capturing them, enslaving them, because the town is burning. So she remained the region of the Kievan Rus with the support of the army and her people. She changed the system of tribute, gathering, that's called paludi, which is the basically a collection of taxes for each of the persons. In the first legal reform recorded in Eastern Europe, she continued to evade proposal of marriage, defending the city with the siege of Kiev in 968, and saved the power of throne for her son, basically, who was Sviatoslav. So, so what's interesting, Olga was one of the first people of the Rus to be colonized. So she accepts the Orthodoxy, the first one, but the people didn't accept the Orthodox religion. She kind of like tried to force it on them, but they still have this god Perun and god Volas and the pagan religion very well in their minds. So therefore, she's the one trying to accept this religion. So basically, so it's interesting. However, she failed to convert Sviatoslav. Sviatoslav is her son, and this is how he looks. This is Sviatoslav. He doesn't look nothing like Russian. This is, depiction of Sviatoslav. That's her son. So he looks a little bit more Turkic. Now you can have to realize that Khazar is around the area, and they do pretty well. And Sviatoslav is around 969 AD. So Khazar kingdom, Bulgar kingdom, also Muslim kingdom is right next to it, and they dress certain way. They look certain way. He looks more of the Turkic than Russian. So it's interesting. This Sviatoslav actually goes on many raids against everybody. So what happens is, she dies, about around 969, but in 965, basically what's happening is Sviatoslav torches Khazar's capital cities. There was 3 major cities. One city was Sarkel, second city was Kerch, and the capital city was Itil. And what's interesting, also after he torches Khazar's capitals, Khazars is no longer a force to be reckoned with, and he takes over their city and destroys their city, Itil, which is a capital. What's interesting is Byzantium approaches him. They're having a lot of issues with Danube Bulgars. Okay, so they approach this guy Sviatoslav and they say, "Listen, you have an amazing empire that you built. You just destroyed Khazars. You have an amazing army. What if we give you 15,000 pounds of gold? Would you be able to go out there and destroy those Danube Bulgars are giving us issues?" Of course, he accepted it. He became a mercenary that goes and invades Danube Bulgars, basically alienates them, takes the whole northern, Bulgaria, with about 60,000 warriors. He goes in, but now what's interesting is Byzantium is scared. They're like, this guy is incredibly amazing. How do we stop him? So they basically, what they did is, while he was conquering Bulgaria, they hired Pechenegs, who were the Turkic people outside of Kiev land, to attack Kiev, because he was actually doing the raiding, and all the army left. So the Pechenegs had a carte blanche to go in and destroy the whole city of Kiev. So as and Byzantium paid to those Pechenegs to do that. But his grandmother Olga, she was still alive at the time, but this was 965. She died in 969. Basically she defends the city until he comes back, and he comes back and he destroys all the Pecheneg army, and then and basically goes on other raids, and eventually gets captured and gets killed, and his skull is being used as a vessel to drink by a Pecheneg tribesman.
I have a question on this guy's origin. You said that he looks Turkic. Now, is there anything in, I mean, of course, this is not a photograph, this is a representation.
Correct.
I mean, is there anything known about his lineage that would be Turkic?
No, he was fully, I would say at this time, he's not even Russian, he's Nordic. He's a completely of the Varangian. Olga was 100% Varangian. She was 100% Rurik, and he was, he was 100% Rurik. So they only intermarry within their own Varangian class, caste system. He was just dressing this certain way.
Right.
He almost looks like the Turkic Slavs warriors. What is it? Yanachars. He looks like a Yanachar. He dresses that same way. But in the chronicles, it's explicitly said he didn't dress like Russian. He didn't dress like Nordic. He wanted, because of the influence that around the areas that they had.
Right.
I don't know if it was a fashion at the time, but he definitely was an intimidating figure, I guess.
You have to keep in mind that you're coming from you originally come from a part of the world where all these people are kind of better known to you. I mean, to us like native North Americans, it's a little This is a very esoteric part of the world for us. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm making an assumption here. I don't think I'm wrong. You know, so some of the terms that you pass along are not terms that we're familiar with.
Well, you can ask me. I can, like, I try to translate as much as I can. What like which particular term that.
Well, you just mentioned something. I think it was a reference to some people. I'm not even sure because
Oh, okay.
you're
Well,
running a lot of terms, you know, by us fairly quickly.
Okay, Dreblani.
Yeah.
The word дерево, which means a tree in Russian.
Okay, I mean, I got that, but there was, you know, other than the people who had, you know, besieged Kiev for a while with the start of the P people. You know, then there was something else you just mentioned that I wish I could be more clear, but it's like this stuff is very unfamiliar.
Yeah, you can stop. That's why, let's open for kind of,
Okay.
like I can, so anyway, I mean, I can come back to if something is not,
Zach,
Yeah.
sort of a question. I guess the Khazars are related to Kazakhstan. I think they came out of Kazakhstan, did they not? So those were Turkic people. I mean, to this day, the Kazakhs, the Uzbeks, the Kazakhs and the Uzbeks still speak Turkic languages. The Bulgars moved west, conquered Bulgaria, but then assimilated into the Slavic culture. Likewise, the Vikings coming down from the north presumably spoke Scandinavian, North Germanic, but they were
Oops.
Ralph, you disappeared.
Yeah, we
so the
lost.
Slavic people seem to be pretty good in absorbing foreign people and assimilating them into Slavic language and culture. Thanks.
I was going to say, I'm comfortable with you throwing around alien terms for rulers because we use the word king too promiscuously, which is Germanic, and people make a whole bunch of assumptions that may not apply here.
Yeah.
Or it's a little bit hard to hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. I'm just saying, I'm comfortable with you throwing around alien words for rulers because the word king, I think, is used too much. Germanic kingship is meaningful for Germanic cultures.
Right. I mean, the word, obviously everybody knows the word czar, but it wasn't, at the time, it wasn't prevalent. They used words, you could say knyaz, which is actually relevant to prince.
Mhm.
So they had a bunch of principalities or princes. Knyaz means prince. Boyars means the bureaucracy or royalty.
Those are the nobles. Those are the
Correct.
nobles. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically, if I threw some word, just let me know. And again, I apologize. I wasn't.
Good.
I wasn't.
Like
Go ahead.
for example, I'm reading up on Pyrrhus, and Pyrrhus classified himself as a Basilius. It turns out Alexander the Great is a Basilius, and the guys in Byzantium describe themselves as Basilius.
Oh, interesting.
Even though we call them emperors, it's just like Basilius is usually translated to king.
Well, the
But
czar,
you're almost better off not doing that.
right? Name czar came from Caesar.
Yes, right.
So that's where the, it was taken by.
Yeah, as did the German Kaiser.
Kaiser,
Mhm.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we agreed on, something.
And Caesar Romero.
Yes. All right. So relationship with Holy Roman Emperor. Okay. So how does he know about all this? Obviously he wants to be in preview of everything. So remember, Olga was canonized in Orthodox religion, right? She could have went to, Pope and said, listen, I want to be a Catholic, you know, and she apparently didn't do that because she wanted to be, she did it because of the fact that Byzantium was so close and there was a trade relations, and she felt that it was more important that if Russians would convert, which she was unsuccessful, even her own grandson didn't convert, and he's still a pagan religion, believing in Perun and Volus, which were the Slavic gods, you know, multi-gods, you know, and she's and she converted to Orthodoxy, which is interesting. So anyway, 7 Latin sources document that Olga, his grandma, embassy to Holy Roman Emperor Otto I of 959, the continuation of the Regina of Prum mentioned that envoys requested the emperor to appoint a bishop and a priest for their nation. So they did reach out to Kievan Rus and said, listen, why don't we do that? The chronicle accuses the envoys of lies, commenting that their tricks were not exposed until later. Titmar of Marseburg said that the first Archbishop of Magdeburg, Saint Adalbert of Magdeburg, before being promoted to the high rank, was sent by Emperor Otto to country of the Rus as a simple bishop, but was expelled by pagan allies of Sviatoslav by him. The same data is duplicated in the annals of Hohenberg and Hildesheim, among others. So they kept sending the envoys to Russia saying, or Rus, we want to convert you to Catholicism. They said, nope, not interested. So that's, you know, that's basically, you know, where we stand with that. So let's go to the next slide. This is one of the pictures of how the Russian warriors looked, but they call them bogatyr. Bogatyr means a large or a big knight, Russian knight. They call them bogatyr. Okay. Then we come to this guy, Vladimir the Great. All right. So he was around 958 to 2015 of the House of Rurik, was born as a third son of the Grand Prince of Kiev, the most powerful and influential state of Rusland. When his father died, he inherited the city of Novgorod. And I'll get to the map eventually. Eventually, he defeats and kills his 2 older brothers and becomes the Grand Prince of Kiev. It was apparently prevalent. You have to kill your sibling. Vladimir was real, but his story is largely legendary. He was greatly influenced by Greek culture, permeating his age. Legend has it that Vladimir sought to unite the Ruslands through the one true faith. So he is actually more successful in converting Russia into Orthodoxy. And how did he do that? So he reached out to 3 different religions. You know, I mean, it's always a story, right? You know, what happens, right? So first he asked the Jews, how come you guys don't have your own land? You're saying you're a great religion, but the Jerusalem is destroyed. You don't have land. So I'm not interested. Then he reached out to a Muslim religion. They said, well, there's a couple of things that you guys have to do. So what do we have to do? You can't drink, you can't eat pork, and we have to circumcise you. And he said, no go. I can't do those. The biggest no for me is alcohol. You can circumcise me, whatever you want to do. No alcohol, can't do it. And also, since one of his relatives already conquered the or dealt with Bulgars, and some of them were Muslims, he said they were pretty green. All they do is, you know, pray to dead all the time, and it's not fun. Then he went to Roman Catholics, and they had the same thing. Remember, this was Dark Ages, right? Roman Catholics didn't have elaborate churches. Nothing was developed to the point of how it is right now. Of course, he goes to Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, and he's mesmerized. You know, they didn't have a iconoclasty then. So all these icons everywhere. it's the most amazing building you can think of. He's completely sold on it. I'm picking up Orthodox, religion. That's all. I don't want, and then he forcibly converts everybody in Kievan Rus.
What's interesting is Novgorod is very far north.
Correct.
And Kiev, of course, is basically south in the lands of the Rus, so the Russian lands. In a certain sense, this was one country, although it didn't necessarily always have one ruler, but it was sort of like north to south. At this point, there was a sense that they had something in common.
Correct. That's yes.
Are we talking of, oh, excuse me, is that Nizhny Novgorod? That one by the river?
Where? Which one? No,
The
that's
Novgorod that you were talking about, is that Nizhny Novgorod?
at that time. It's a little bit. It's not the locality of Novgorod. Nizhny Novgorod is in a different location. Yeah, I know what you mean. Anyway, so there is also contemporaries that talk about seeing the early Kievan Rus, and his name is, I don't know if you guys ever read Ibn Fadlan, who was a Muslim, you could say a historian, traveler, who actually is responsible in converting the Volga Bulgars to Muslim religion initially, or initiating that conversion. So what he did is he traveled to Kievan Rus, and this is what he got to say. He actually was part of this interesting tradition that was, he inhibited. Fadlan watched a fascinating and Harrow as a body of the great Viking chieftain, and he still calls them Viking. They're actually not Viking. They're already combination of Slav. Viking chieftain was laid in his longship alongside a slave girl who had volunteered to be ritually sacrificed. The boat and all the precious personal belongings it carried were thus set alight in a great bonfire. And the souls within are committed to go to Valhalla. The funeral practices were probably unique to the Kievan Vikings and deviated from a Scandinavian rites. However, it's a testament that some form of northern paganism thrived around among the warrior caste of Kievan realm. So they already converted to Christianity, and they still do this pagan rituals documented by a Muslim traveler, Ibn Fadlan. So it was an interesting aspect of that. All right, let's move on. So now, interestingly enough, the reason they converted to Christianity, there was Greek Orthodox missionaries from Byzantium Empire began entering the Rus lands in the 9th century and began converting followers from the peoples of the Rus. Many of the Russian tradition cultural elements come from the influence Russia is often said to have come out of a Byzantium mold. The influence of the Greek missionaries were profound. The Russian alphabet, Cyrillics we just mentioned, is derived from Greek. Russian Orthodoxy directly influenced by Greek Church. Future Muscovite society would be based on a Byzantine model, because remember, Ivan the Terrible called himself, the next Rome. He meant, Byzantium, obviously, because it was a Roman Empire. All right, so there's another view. So we have Novgorod on top, Moscow on the right, and then you have Kiev on the bottom, and it's connected. Dnieper River goes through Kiev. This is probably more modern area. All right. So it's interesting that when Vladimir was converting Russians, he said, finally, the emissaries arrived at Constantinople to investigate Eastern Orthodoxy and were taken to the Hagia Sophia. That's how he chose the Orthodoxy. They were so impressed, they immediately returned to Vladimir, explaining they had found the one true faith by which he could unite his people. It is said that Vladimir was so enthused that he personally baptized hundreds of his subjects in a Dnieper River. He basically threatened people, saying, "You guys got to come to the outskirts of Kiev, or else you guys are gonna all die." All right. So let's keep going. All right. Now, I want to talk about the different aspects of Kievan Rus. All right. So now, Kievan Rus was the largest European state in its time, but it was sparsely populated. So it had different, kingdoms within it. Federal society. Kievan society lacked the rigid social structure, class institution, and population at autonomous towns that were staple to the Western European feudalism. As a result, serfdom was almost non-existent in Kievan Rus. Then you have serfdom. You could say there's a form of slavery, but the servant would almost non-existent because the serfs would just run around and go to different places. Unique social structure, and Grand Prince of Kiev ruled over princes. Together they dominated the society. The princedom emerged from the union of families and banded together to improve productivity of land, which eventually became major cities. So I just want you to get a little bit of taste of social proficiency. Next, legal proficiency. The law code of Kievan Rus was quite advanced for its time. They call it Ruskaya Pravda, Kievan legal code. Confined punishment mostly to fines, even murder. If a man kill a man, then a brother avenges a brother, or a son avenges a father, or a cousin or a nephew. If no one will take revenge, the 80 grivnas for the murder, if he be a knyaz, which means the prince man, or knyaz official, but if he is a Rusin or a grid, a low-ranking druzhnik means low-ranking soldier, or the merchant or boyar official, or a mechnik, which is a swordsman, or an exile, or a Slovenian Novgorodian, then 40 grivnas for the murdered. So they have different, basically, it's almost like if you think of it as Magna Carta, in a sense. It's very, written so well that, basically it's an eye for an eye. Unless you don't have anybody to do it for you, then, it depends of the ranking of the person, then you're allowed to kill or not. Despite great influence of Byzantine administration on the world, the great culture and commercial ties between Byzantium and Rus, the Ruskaya Pravda bears no resemblance to laws codes of Byzantine Empire. Byzantine Empire is using Roman code of law. Russians had a different code of laws, almost a little tribal. Laws of Rus were more humane than legislation of Eastern European states. The absence of the capital and corporal punishment reflects the Norse way of thought, aka Varangians. If you remember, in the north, in the northern traditions, you could buy, if somebody dies, for example, it's not an eye for an eye, you can actually pay for the murder of another person if it happened accidental. A code only issued severe punishment for arson, cattle mutilation, enroachment on rich people, princes, merchants, official, and property. Debt. The law code also outlined interest laws, debt resolution, protection of the minorities, so forth, so on. Religious proficiency. The people of the Kievan Rus and their predecessors were Slavic pagans. They did not follow any of the major religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Zoroastrian, until he took the Orthodoxy. They followed the religious culture tradition that their ancestors had passed down to them orally for thousands of years. Slavic pagans belief varied from the region to region. It involved in idol worshipping or multiple gods, but not much else is known. Vladimir the Great of Kiev decided, with the help of his boyars, to accept new faith for himself and his realm, 980 to 1015. and they talk about different invoice and stuff like that. That's that. Trade. Trade was a major part of the Kievan society. Power was also primarily based on trade. Large cities like Kiev, Novgorod served the traditional posts. Traders traveled by boats on water and caravan land. Farmers traded grain, honey, wax, furs. Nomads traded animals. Rangers gave slaves and forest goods and received manufactured goods, money, which was coin and jewelry at a time. Any questions? Okay. Primary sources. So we talked about this guy, the monk from Russia, talking about it on 1100s. But they also was a Byzantine sources, especially about the canonization of Olga. And so the Byzantium-Russian treaty is one of the few primary sources about Kievan Russian that we have today in the regional forum. In the summary, the treaty states laws that both empires must follow regarding the minor disputes between two empires. If you think of it, every time the Russians invaded or Kievan Rus invaded Byzantium, all they want to do is they want to get better tariffs, better customs, exchanges. They wanted to get some kind of trade privileges from Byzantium. As we know, Romans weren't explicitly willing to give preferential treatment, and Russians were able to get that from them by invading Eastern Roman Empire all the time. Cause of the fall: disrupted trade routes. As we know, Volga Bulgars being conquered by Mongols, isolation. They weren't really connected to a lot of the other Nordic towns, and internal conflict. The sons of Sviatoslav and Vladimir killed each other all the time. Constant war and threats. And then in 13th century got defeated at the Battle of Kalka, which we'll cover when we do that, by Mongols. And I actually want to play a video for that, if you guys don't mind. And this is going to be a short one today, sorry, because we have one on Saturday and Sunday. Let me see. All right, and you guys let me know. Hold on, let me just stop it right now. All right, let me share the screen. All right. What the heck? Can you see the screen, guys? All right.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, we can see it.
All right, 1 second. I want to play a video on the Battle of Kalka. It's like 2 minutes. What the heck? Sorry. Sorry, guys. What? Sorry. I gotta stop moving my thing. I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. Somebody's, I need to admit somebody, sorry. All right, that's that. All right, somebody wants to admit. So, and I guess let me just stop sharing. Stop sharing. All right. So, and the last thing is primary reason for the end of Kievan Rus was political instability created by rules of succession. All the various principalities were ruled by members of the Rurik dynasty, but it was a staircase succession. Members of the dynasty were assigned territories. In the principal one was Kiev. Each territory was led by a prince, czar, but in Kiev, the grand prince led them all. When grand prince died, the next legitimate heir, the oldest Rurik dynasty heir, not necessarily a son, left his principality and moved to Kiev. After Vladimir died, there were 3 years of disarray during which 2 of his sons, Boris and Gleb, were killed at the request of another son, Svetopolk. The 2 would become the first saints of a Slavic church. In 1018, Yaroslav the Wise, one of the survivors' sons, ascended to the throne and kept it until 1054. Although under Yaroslav rule, the Kievan Rus continued to expand, and a variety of marriages to royal families in Europe, Poland, Norway, England continued to maintain the federation trading power. But when Yaroslav died in 1054, power passed to his son Yaroslav, who became and mirrored in a succession battle that lasted through several rulers until 1240, when Mongols attacked Kiev. The northern part remained in control of the Golden Horde. The remainder became fragmented. So I don't know if you guys know, but Golden Horde ruled Russia for at least 400 years. And basically, the way that the Mongols ruled, they let the principality rule themselves, and they collect the taxes from them. And then, so the Battle of the Khalkha was one of the major turning points where, Russia lost its independence virtually to Mongols, and due to the fact that they were the principalities were not in agreement, and some of the princesses were still arriving a day after the battle, which was not a coherent stand up. But who could stand up to Mongols anyway? They were kind of like Germans of their days, so to speak.
So did eventually, was it Ivan the Terrible who basically defeated the Mongols, or
no? Ivan the Terrible. It was prior to him. It was his father Michael, but there was several battles. There was basically Golden Horde became such a terrible state after the Timur Lame defeated Tahtamish, who was the head of the Golden Horde, and and Timur Lame did not like, even though he was part of the Mongolian Empire, but he completely destroyed Golden Horde, and they didn't really dare to attack Russia after that, because and then there was Nevsky, who also partially responsible in defeating both sides, and Swedish knights. Teutonic Knights and also the Mongols. There was an era of different battles that happened, but mostly it's because Mongols were so weak. They got defeated by Timur Lenk. They couldn't really mount any resistance or collect taxes from Russian principalities anymore.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions you guys have? Mark, how are you, my friend? Mark
Not
just-
bad. Sorry, I messed up. I saw 7 o'clock and I thought that meant 7 o'clock, not 6 o'clock. My bad.
Nah, don't worry about it. Listen, I
was looking forward to it.
I put it, well, you know, I didn't do such a good job, but Saturday and Sunday would be better presentation. I won't be by me. So I didn't, I'll post this online as well. So you could take a look at that.
Okay.
I might be able to maybe even give a little video of some of the words that I use, Russian words or Eastern Slavic words that I might have said pretty quickly here and was not able to translate because they're, you know, as a Russian speaker, it's more, it's apparent to me, but it's, you know, I need to be more cognizant, you know, and you guys are all Russian speakers by now, so doesn't matter. You've been to about 80 of my presentations, so you know, I mean, you know, obviously if I present on the Roman Empire, there's no, you know, there's no Russian there. So I indulge. Yeah, so Saturday we have, let me just get through presentations this month and next month. So do join Saturday. Should be an interesting one. Foundation of Republic of Rome. It would be Paul presenting. As you know, he's an incredible presenter. So is everybody else too.
What time is Saturday? Sorry, Zach.
12 o'clock, 12 p.m. Then Sunday we have Turkic people and their empire. As we know, it started with you know, Khaganate, Turkic Khaganate in China, all the way through current Asia Minor, and we only know, I mean, in the 80s there was only one Turkish nation, was Turkey, you know, and after the Soviet breakout, you know, there's 5 more it came to be, but it used to be so many more, you know, we're talking about, you know, Khaganate, Turkish Khaganate, we're talking about Karahitai, we go, you know, there is like gazillion of them. There was, then we have, so Richard is presenting on Sunday at 4 o'clock this Sunday. Then next Wednesday, we have Plutarch, Dion presented by Greg. Then I'm presenting Volga Bulgars. And then to Rolf's point, we should do Khazars right after that, maybe in a couple of weeks or something. So I'll do Khazars because as a Jewish person, it's interesting to me, you know, I'll do a little research, so being an interesting fact. But there's not a lot to it. That's the issue. I mean, there's not like there's a rabbinical court of Khazars like Maimonides, you know, Maimonides in Morocco. You know, there's really nothing.
It didn't last long, and there's a question of just how, you know, what's it just like an elite that was converted to Judaism, or what the story was, and you know, they needed I guess a couple more centuries to develop. They never had that time.
Right. Well,
You know, I think they were really cut short as a historical people to really have an impact.
well, I showed you the guy who destroyed them. He looks pretty Mongolian to me, Sviatoslav. So yeah, thanks to him, he ended the Jewish nation. But what are you gonna do? You know, he created another. I mean, that's the nations are forged on the other ones. There's other interesting presentations. I don't know if you guys like FIFA World Cup. You know, Aaron is doing that one in July 8th, and there's another interesting one, the fight over Macedonian diversity. As you know, Macedonia was renamed North Macedonia, you know. That would be on July 18th. Aaron and Rich are going to be presenting that. Then we do an interesting one, Old Testament archaeological discovery. I'm particularly interested in it. I just kind of like take us through the Old Testament and if there was any archaeological discoveries to that. No pun intended. Obviously it's not a religious thing. It's just, and then if stuff like that. And I wish you guys were in New York. We're actually doing an outing. We're going to do Uzbek food adventure, July 25th. If you're in New York, please come. And there's a lot of interesting ones in August. We have a music in medieval times. We're actually going to have a PhD presenting that one, and maybe even playing some music.
So are you originally from Uzbekistan?
That's correct. I came here in '94. I'm from Tashkent.
Okay. Now, the Bukharian Jewish community is from where?
That's from all the cities in Uzbekistan. There's some cities in Kazakhstan. It was just called Bukharian by Russians that invaded and called it Turkestan when they invaded in 19th century. They couldn't call. I mean, it's just basically indigenous Jews that lived there, and they might as well could have called them Uzbek Jews. It's just because the city Bukhara had the most of them, so they call them Bukharian Jews because the city Bukhara. But they're not, like for example, our language is almost 99.9% close to Caucasus Jews who live in Russia, Dagestan. They call Tat language. It's just,
Zach, but those cities are very commercial, right? That's why there was a concentration of Jewish people, Bukhara and.
Not before Russia conquered it. They were not very commercial at all. Remember, the nations, the Muslim nations were at least 500 years behind the industrialized nations like Russia and Great Britain. So a lot of Bukharian Jews were involved in the trade of dyeing cloth. So they were basically turning into the blue dye, different clothes. That was their main trade in the Muslim country of Bukhara Khaganate, because of the fact that there was nothing available. And then when Russia came, the indigenous population of Uzbeks did not take it kind to Russians invading, and Russia needed to trust somebody, so they trusted Jews. And a lot of the Russian Bukharian Jews became extremely rich, like filthy rich. They had their factories in Moscow, where Ashkenazi weren't allowed to go to Moscow in the 19th century because of the Pale of Settlements, but Bukharian Jews lived in Moscow, do their business. My grandfather particularly, and I'm only 45, but my grandfather was actually born in 1873 because I'm the last son of my father, and he's the last son of his father. And he bought 2 houses in Jerusalem before it was a British protectorate at the time in 1912. So, and he was in Paris, he was everywhere. And they were Russian style colonial housing, was extremely huge houses. And he did really well for himself. He had a factory, he had a lending business in Uzbekistan. Prior to that, they were all poor. But when Russia came, they needed to use somebody to understand the local populace, and because of the great game, they wanted to stay in Uzbekistan. They used Jews as their conduit. And then obviously after they realized they practiced Judaism, they became anti-Semitic and they took everything from them. Yeah, obviously.
So I look forward to being with you in Queens on July 25th, COVID permitting.
Yes, yeah, no, yeah, it would be nice. It's a nice place, and we did the first outing in a Persian restaurant, and it was a good turnout. We just did it to certain people, but now we're opening for everybody because we didn't know how it's going to be with COVID, stuff like that.
What neighborhood is it?
Queens, it's Regal Park.
Rego Park, okay.
Forest Hills, Regal Park, that's where Baharian Jews leave.
All right, okay.
Jane, you joining us or are you going to another Machu Picchu? Jane is, did you reconsider doing Incas for me? No, she doesn't want to do Incas. Oh, God. So, Ralph, do you want to do any Roman subjects? We have a lot of topics that, if you're interested.
No,
I mean, it doesn't, it's not
no,
required.
I have no special expertise on the Romans.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. But anything you want to present, let me know. And Marika volunteered for a couple. Howard, the people pitching in, I appreciate that. Because people are tired of seeing the same face like me.
What has Marika volunteered for?
Marika is gonna do. Let me put up the schedule so you
I
guys.
don't remember.
That's not good. That's not
You'll
good.
be surprised.
Oh my God. Ay, 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 Dios mío.
Yeah, get reminded there, yeah.
Yeah, 1 second. I did assign something, I remember. I just want to.
We can check, Zach, we can check the,
Oh,
the
okay.
schedule, right?
Okay, well, let's look at the schedule now. You guys can you see the schedule?
Yep.
So the one that's this Saturday is Paul and Greg. Greg is doing the Foundation of Republic. Marika is doing Religion in Republic Rome. That should be an interesting one. So Zoroastrian, Manisha, all the good ones prior to Christianity, obviously. You can even pick up Judaism. I mean, I don't know if that's still applied. That's the one. I mean, so I'm looking for presenters on several subjects. I know the Howard, you said you're gonna do Purchas, right?
I'll do Paris. That's, you had a date there. I saw it. Where is it? It was September, August 28th.
Yes, sir. I don't know, Punic Wars, am I interested? Second Punic Wars, Hannibal, conquest of Greece. We have Gracchi, slavery in Rome. Oh, it's actually already taken, but Roman Republic of Professionalism during Republic period. Sulla, wow, there's interesting ones there.
Where do you have this posted?
This is posted on our website, omnicarta.org. It's, yeah, here, I'll put it in chat.
What's that again?
Omnicarta.org. I'll put it in chat.
Omnicarta.org.
And all our presentations are there. So it's really nice that you can navigate, and it's all, once I update it here, it's already posted there. I'm looking for regular subject matters, anything you're interested to talk about, any sports subjects, any kind of anything you want to talk about. Like I even talked about sex in ancient Rome and Greece, and guess what? I have 3,000 views on YouTube right now. 3,000 views. It's unbelievable. It's only been 3 months.
What are the reviews like?
People like it. People say, people post. One of the things that recently Marika presented, people said really good things. Then Lisa presented something, and Lisa did the Etruscans and the raves.
That's very nice.
Yeah,
it was really nice. Mark did on wine. People say good things. Different variety of things, not just ancient. So if you guys are interested, talk about anything. I mean, even if you want to go back to Mesopotamia or ancient Egypt, I'm welcoming it, because we're not going to get to Egypt until like 2 years from now. It's going to be a while, let's just say, because we have all these things. And Rich is going to start presenting his, Turkish subject matters. And we're going to have Aaron presenting on Pacific War.
Yep, I'm going to pick that back up again.
You're going to pick that up. Yeah. So just, I have, scheduled 8/29.
And then also the football one. So we
yeah,
still have to
the
do.
soccer one is amazing, by the way. If you guys want, if you guys don't know anything about soccer, this is a perfect. It's going to talk about FIFA corruption, the FIFA organization of the game. It's politics around it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and also the history too. So we started with the early game, which is the 19th century into the 20th century, pretty much through the 50s, and then we're going to cover basically like 2 decades a session, sort of like the Pacific War version of soccer. It'll that's pretty much what it is, to be honest. And then we'll just go through the evolution of this, right? Like how did this thing happen that's this big, right? This is a very unique thing in the history of culture, right? I mean, there's only a handful of things like this: music, movies, things that have these sort of massive distribution channels, right? And soccer's sort of a little unique in that it has that, but then it also has, it's like music really in a lot of ways, right? There's a local production-ness to it, but then there's a global version of it, right? So anyways, that's what we're gonna cover all that.
I'm actually looking for a presenter for gladiators as a sports stars or sex slaves.
You gotta get off the sex slave thing, dude. That's like a weird thing.
I was curious about
they
that
were
one.
considered to be Don Juans, of the date. I mean, all the
I know.
all
They made interesting sculptures. I was looking into that a while ago. I might be able to do it. I don't want to promise it yet.
well,
That's July, right?
I'll put tentatively, Howard. Tentatively.
Yeah, very tentatively. I just watched
What's your cat's name?
Chester.
Was it Katya?
Chester.
Cather?
Chester. I picked him up from an animal shelter. They named him Chester.
Oh, Kester.
Chester.
Oh, okay.
Chester.
So yeah, like I said, if you guys are like anything you want.
Chester. Okay. Or Chester, right?
Yeah.
Chester. I don't know. I can't understand Canadians. I just have trouble,
Well, no. So what it is I mean, to be honest, Canadian English. There's. I mean, it's kind of, that would be a funny thing to do, is how many Englishes there are, right? Because English is this funky language that it's sort of like it's like a Latin toolkit around the world, right? Everybody builds their own version. Like I spend normally I go to Scandinavia in the summer and the Netherlands, but basically in normal years I'll do that again next year, and they're basically constructing their own English up there. It's sort of like American. It's really their American, and it's because there's too many weird languages they don't want to learn anymore. The kids, especially. The kids will not learn 3 of those languages. They'll learn 1 for sure, maybe 2. Most of the time, it's English. And for the youngest generation, they're just learning English. I mean, it's crazy, right? I have friends that are friends of mine that are grandparents now, and their grandkids are just learning English at home and at school, and that's it. So they'll be like arguably one of the first generations that'll be without colonialism, without any kind of thing like that. They'll just be arbitrarily eliminating their dominant language culture for the sake of it. I'm sure
are they not learning Swedish? Like
Yeah,
it makes a lot of this makes sense.
I mean, they'll learn it.
Educated.
They'll learn it as a secondary language, the same way as it's exactly like me as a second generation American. My grandmother was born in Chihuahua, Mexico, and I was the youngest, also from my dad. So it just, Spanish was just a kind of a nice to have. It didn't really have any extra value in that way. I'm not saying it doesn't have value. I'm not saying it isn't meaningful and couldn't help you in life. I'm just saying, like, structurally, it just was sort of like, sure, you could do that. It wasn't forced, right? It wasn't imposed. And so I have friends of mine who their kids aren't imposing Swedish, because here's the thing. In Scandinavia, people move around so much, right? People will live in Sweden, Norway, Denmark. If you're in Stockholm, you'll often have relatives, or you might go to work in Finland. So it's at a certain point, the only thing that's the same is the fact that, especially if you're in any technical field, it's in English. And you're finding now that they're even publishing, and this is sort of like the canary in the coal mine. They're publishing, how, when you publish legal requirements, you're supposed to publish them somewhere. They're publishing those in both in English and whatever that host language is now. And of course, if it's a joint stock company across 2 or 3 of those countries, then when they publish, it's going to be in English, right? They're not going to publish it in Finnish, Swedish, Norwegian. I mean, they're just not going to do that.
So I should tell my nephew to stop studying Norwegian, eh? I mean,
he could study Norwegian for fun. But
yeah, he was, I mean, if Trump won last year's election, he was considering emigrating to Norway. He was looking around for some place to emigrate to. This is
so he was one of those, because I have relatives like that too, which I'm just like, I'm not letting national politics dictate my life. I mean, but some people, I have friends of mine like that, actually.
Well, Norway has good skiing, and he's an avid skier. I mean, we're looking
to go to Norway.
Yeah, we're looking at his view of.
Be careful. Are they downhill skiers or are they cross-country skiers? They may be skiing down mountains is fun. Skiing up them is not fun.
He could do it all. I mean, we're looking at his view from his living room at Lake Tahoe, but he would kind of give it up if he.
No, I think that's. I think that's totally irrational. But people do that. I mean, I have relatives that were planning on doing the same thing, and I'm like, really? So you're gonna?
I don't know if he'd really do it, but he was serious enough to visit there for a while, and he's serious enough in studying Norwegian.
And tell but you don't need to study that. I mean, I've gone there for 10. Really, this summer and last summer are the only ones I haven't been there in the last 11 years, and I spend usually 2 months.
Yeah, they speak English as well. I mean, I understand that.
That's all I speak is English.
Yeah,
I've never had a problem.
Right.
And if you add the time I've been there, it's been over maybe 14 months of my life, and I've never had anything. I've never had anything, any need.
No, I'm sure, but he just wanted to be kind of authentic, and
being authentic is being. I mean, so that's. Put it this way, that's about as authentic as studying Spanish at a local school here and then going down to Guadalajara and you're just not you're going to be authentic when you move there and live in Guadalajara for 2 years and take classes there in Spanish. Like that's how you're authentic.
Okay, one of my to-dos here in Canada is to learn to speak French. I'm a typical unilingual.
How's that working out?
I haven't done it yet.
That's
but one of the issues here is that the French dialect in Montreal and Quebec is quite different from the standard dialects in France.
Of course,
I know it's proverbially called joual.
It's called joual, yeah, and I think it is typical in parts of Normandy.
Which is a Quebecois way of saying cheval.
I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, it's a distortion of cheval.
I'll have to ask around about that. I know some people that are from France, and when they go to Quebec, they have to speak English.
I mean, I lived in Montreal for a couple of years, so I know something of where I